Y'all know what it is. It's time for Image in the 90s. And today we're talking about Youngblood #1. Straight up, never read Youngblood, but I have collected the entire first volume of Youngblood, and I'm ready to dive in because I was never a Rob Liefeld fan at this time, but I started getting into Rob Liefeld, to be honest with you, more so when he was doing Captain America. I actually really like Rob Liefeld's Captain America run, like a lot. So, going back though, Youngblood was not something I was into. I was into Spawn, I was into Wildcats, but I wasn't into Savage Dragon, Cyberforce, or Youngblood. But I was into Brigade and Bloodstrike, and we're definitely going to be getting to those. So this is my first time reading Youngblood #1. First thing to notice, aside from it being the very first Image comic, came out February, I think? February or March of 2020, or 1992, sorry. Rob Liefeld's Youngblood. It is a flip comic, so it's two-sided. There is a story for the home team, the public team, and a story for the away team, or the covert team. We're going to start with the famous cover, the most famous image, and let's just dissect that first. First of all, this is a badass cover from Rob Liefeld. Like, seriously, X-Force was a huge hit. He had made New Mutants a big hit. Kind of got Louise Simonson, got Wheezy kind of fired off of the title, took it over, turned it into X-Force, started Image, and at the time wanted to do this book while he was doing X-Force and Cable, but Marvel wasn't going to let that be. Plus, he wanted to call it The Exterminators, but Youngblood has its genesis in early Megaton Man issues or something, right? Or something like that, right? Maybe not. Yeah, because Megaton Comics or something like that. So that was back in the day, in the 80s, but it finally sees its fruition. Youngblood is meant to be a superhero team that is known in the public. And this book does not do a great job of setting everything up for you. So you have to take for granted that you know what the premise is. But this story starts with Shaft in his civilian identity out there with his girlfriend, going through at the mall, and then he gets attacked. He has to start attacking his assailant. Turns out it's all a ploy, and then there's somebody with a gun on him, like a futuristic gun, shoots at him, but he's like a master marksman. He's like Hawkeye and kind of like Bullseye. So he doesn't have his arrows, so he throws a pin and takes the dude out. He tumbles off of the balcony, and he's like, this is the price of fame. This is the price of being known. You get some really weird, quirky Rob Liefeld artwork throughout this issue, but he hears that there's an alarm going off, a Youngblood alarm. He's going in. Then we get introduced to Bedrock. He eventually gets called Badrock because of the Flintstone connection there. But at first, we get introduced to Bedrock. He is like a 13-year-old boy, but none of that stuff is referenced here. Then very quickly, we get introduced to Die Hard. They all are receiving the call, the Youngblood call, the bat signal, if you will, the Youngblood signal. So Die Hard apparently is sleeping, I don't know, in some kind of technology or whatnot. None of these characters, none of the concept gets elaborated on or really fully introduced. Then we get Chapel. Now, Cartoonist Kayfabe did a video on this issue earlier this year, and one of my favorite bits of their video is when Ed Piscor's reading along the Chapel bit, because he's in bed with a woman. He's like a different woman every night, and then he just puts on his makeup and his costume, and he's like, yo, I gotta dip out. Then we see Vogue, and she's intentionally going to be late just to ruffle some feathers. So they get to the meeting. They're there. Shaft's got his motorcycle indoors, Chapel's got his motorcycle indoors. Now, I do know these characters, and I do know Chapel in particular because of Spawn. And one of my favorite moments in Spawn is because originally Chapel was the dude who killed Al Simmons, betrayed him and killed him. They changed that to Jessica with the movie and in the comic because of the rights issues and the Liefeld getting ousted and all that kind of stuff. lots of more of the complicated stuff going on with Image Comics at this time is all the behind the scenes stuff, right? But I did know Chapel, and there was this great bit where he like flayed some of Chapel's face off and gave him the actual skull look for real. Damn, I'm getting these characters confused. But Shaft, not the anyway. I was about to make a Shaft joke, but anyway, so Shaft is like, yo, we got to whip into shape. We got this thing. These supervillains are tearing ass across the supervillain team called the Four. So they're out just kind of destroying shit, I guess. And so Youngblood has to go after them. I think I've seen some of these characters before in like Brigade, I think, but Youngblood shows up. Die Hard swoops in, takes out that one dude. Jim Rugg on the kayfabe video mentioned, look at the back arc on Die Hard on that lower panel. It's kind of fucking ridiculous. But this is a really cool, solid page. We'll go through briefly again and talk about the artwork, but I really like this page. This is very heavily influenced by things like Fist of the North Star. I totally pick up that vibe, the small head, long bodies, long legs, long torsos, shit like that. But the dynamic kinetic energy of those lines behind, like, yeah, you're getting away with not doing backgrounds, but at the same time you're providing energy, and that's something that works for me here. And then you get the last big splash of Youngblood there, about to tackle the villains, and that's the end of that bit. Like, literally nothing. You don't get any introduction to these characters, not fully, and none of the concept. Like, they're supposed to be celebrity superheroes and shit like that. None of that is explained or laid out in the slightest in this issue. Now we're going to go to the backside. This is actually the more substantial story, even though it's the home team that becomes the more popular ones. That's the famous cover. This is the more fulfilling story, but at the same time, it's just kind of okay too. But let's get into it. So we got another cast of characters. We get introduced to this plot. We get this dude isn't Saddam Hussein, but he's like Hassan Hussein, right? So it's a stand-in for Saddam Hussein. He's out there causing all kinds of shit. Youngblood has sent in basically their covert away team. And we get this nice double-page splash here. They're led by Sentinel. There's a bunch of characters here that I have no fucking clue who the hell these people are. I know Combat, because Combat's actually on Youngblood's public team eventually. And apparently Cougar, who's the dude with the white stripe. And he's like the Pepe Le Pew Gremlin stripe motherfucker right there. But like, he was originally designed for New Mutants or something. Anyway, they go after this Saddam Hussein stand-in. We get a little bit of information here. Like, Combat is like from a warrior race of people on another planet. He's got this interesting thing going on. So there's actually more development, not a lot, but more development on characters in this B story, which actually also has more pages. You get a really cool composition here. Cougar running up, like jumping across. I really love that face there in the corner right there. I love the line work going on. It looks very feral. Like, if you liked X-Force, this was your jam in these days, right? And then we got some Gideon, just some generic superhero type stuff. And they actually got some nice quippy dialogue kind of going back and forth. And by the way, the lettering in this book does suck. They mentioned it on that kayfabe video, but there's not a credited letterer. It is believed that maybe Liefeld did some of it, but it is shaky and it's not very good. But you got some nice dialogue, some nice quippy nature going on back and forth. We get introduced to some more of these characters that are very forgettable, but the story is a little bit more compelling to me than the story from the A-Team. So they go to this rundown place where they've gotten their intel that this Saddam Hussein guy, Hassan Hussein guy, is there. They're trying to get entry. They all start displaying their powers. We're getting some interesting stuff. Then they kind of get taken out. But one of them, this dude named Sci-Fire, he is like a telekinetic or something, and he shows up. Meanwhile, these dudes with armor show up, and you're getting to see Cougar and Combat kind of take these guys on. Combat loses his helmet. There's a cool design there. You're getting some cool kind of things, but it's just decent. But then you get this nice big splash of Combat there, and I actually really like it. I will point out on this page in particular, the coloring looks very much like mall airbrush t-shirt shop. okay? But you get a little bit more action from everybody. Everybody gets a spotlight for the most part in this story, which is really interesting. Then Sci-Fire finds this Saddam Hussein dude, uses his telekinesis or whatever, and blows this fucking dude's head off, right? Like, and that's what happens. He blows the fucking dude's head off. There it is. It happens off panel, but you see the blood splatter come across. I really like this page. Some interesting color too. I actually like the coloring here, but it's still like 1980s, early 90s mall airbrush t-shirt kind of thing. But all the rest of Youngblood show up. They're like, bruh, Sci-Fire, you killed him. You popped his head off. And they're like, yeah. And that shot of Sentinel right there on the right of the page, I fucking love. It's that Rob Liefeld shaded in eye sockets, but the tiny little bit of a glare on the pupil. I really like that. And they're all dealing there in the aftermath. And then they set it up like Hassan Hussein killed himself. So they don't take the credit for that. So what a weird comic book. What a very weird comic book. First of all, the big, exciting story that involves Bedrock and Shaft and Die Hard and Chapel. And also, you got Combat on this cover, but he's on the other side, but whatever. This story barely gets to anything. There's nothing going on. That being said, Rob Liefeld's got some parts in here where his artwork soars. I really like the faces on this page, and including that big one of the woman, the anchor. I like that. There's some nice movement that you're getting. There's some wonky stuff going on with perspective, with anatomy, and I don't know Rob Liefeld's process. What I've heard is that he makes really tiny thumbnails, blows them up, and then draws on that. What I feel like is that he doesn't do a lot of underdrawing, so he doesn't kind of fit the volume right. He doesn't place the volume of the figures within the perspective and scene very well. I think he just thumbnails out some cool poses and some cool sequences. And I think, like a Kevin Eastman, his strongest point is his layouts and the way he can pace something out very big, boisterous, and kinetic. There are Kirby-esque layouts to me in here, but I think that he doesn't do any underdrawing. I think that he just kind of draws, and that's how I like to do it. It's quicker that way, not putting in the work to see how the figures work in 3 dimensions. I think that's what goes on. I think that's why we get these wonky foreshortening, wide figures, extra volume added to characters that shouldn't be. There's a style he's doing, but I think he learned how to draw poses, and I think he just keeps drawing those poses. I don't think he does a lot of underdrawing. I think it's quick. I think it's rather dashed out in layout and then finished. And there are moments where the finishing works, but it's not the actual line work. Though there's something in the quirkiness of his line work. There's something compelling about it, but there is something about his layout and his pacing. I don't think he's on the level of a Kevin Eastman or a Frank Miller or a Jack Kirby. But he does know how to deliver what most of the audience wants at this time. And there are big moments that really work. And then there's a lot of cluttered stuff, but look at Chapel there on that previous page. That's pretty badass. But if you really start looking at it, it doesn't really quite work. But there is something about it that works. And what it is that energy that is brought, especially in the big pages. Even in this one, with Die Hard breaking his back to deliver that punch, but you feel it. You feel it. So there is something. This page in particular is one of my favorites. The coloring in this book kind of blows. There are moments where it works, but moments where it doesn't. They're trying to figure out that digital color. And like I said, it looks like an airbrush mall t-shirt shop. This first story, though, structurally just doesn't do a good job of introducing the concept or the team. This backup story, though, a little bit better. I think the art is a little bit weaker here. This big 2-page spread, for instance, is a little over-cluttered. So that kind of hinders its ability to really knock us out. And I feel like this one, even though it's the better story, I feel like the art's not quite there. There are pages like this one where it really works, but then it just kind of feels mediocre and just like been there, done that with Rob Liefeld already. But the story is a lot better. But it takes a while to really get there to develop, and it doesn't have as many big action moments like the first one does. So it's really interesting. It's like this one's story heavy, the other one's more flash heavy, but all together it provides a rather uneven, yet at the same time kind of cool and fun reading experience. Youngblood #1. So all in all, I would give Youngblood #1 3 ya digs. The low point of 3 ya digs, maybe like a 2.69. It is clunky as fuck, but it is dynamic, and it's got some interesting layouts and some work. Actually, it is more like a 2.5. It's a 2.5. Let's be honest. I dropped that. It's a 2.5. I can't even do it. Here is my issue of it. So I have gotten every single issue of this, and I'm excited to go through it. Next week we'll be doing Youngblood #2, but there is no kind of like understanding of what the fuck these people are, who they are, how they came about being. Like, none of that happens, and it's one thing to be like, let's save that for later, but at the same time, like, there is nothing in this main story. You get more information on the backstory, but even then you don't get a lot. I really like the book. It's high quality, it's decent, it's newsprint. The colors work for some of it, but for some of it, it is just that orangey brown that you get, crudely airbrushed and stuff. But this was a whole new thing that was going on. I originally heard that this was originally supposed to be done in black and white, which there are moments where you see screen tone used, and I think that makes a lot of sense. There's this thing to enter the Rob Liefeld fan club. So, like, Jim and Ed on Cartoonist Kayfabe, they were talking about that what would this book look like in black and white? It kind of almost looks like it was rendered to be in black and white. This is weird ass, what the fuck? Like, just weird ass background hatching right there. Loose hatching that you'll see throughout this whole thing. Look at the shoulder pads right there. But there is something. There's something to me that's appealing about a Rob Liefeld face, about a Rob Liefeld composition. Youngblood #1 though feels rushed, feels kind of thrown together. 2.5. It was an interesting experiment. I want to see how this develops though. I think the first volume is like 10 issues or so. Next time we'll tackle issue #2, which is also the first appearance of Prophet. Another run, volume 1, I've been trying to collect. I need an issue 8 and 10. If anybody can help out, just let us know. You can reach out to comics. No, you can reach out to popculturephilosophers@gmail.com. But all in all, a fun experience. Not as strong as Rob's work, I think, on New Mutants, which we've been getting into, and we're still going to be unpacking here on Marvel in the 90s. But it's all right. It's like 2.5. It's 2.5. Anyway, what do you think? What do you think about Youngblood, issue #1, 20 years ago, y'all? And this has been Image in the 90s.